I've been thinking about this question that keeps popping up when I open my banking app late at night. Why does money still feel out of control, even when there's a budget sitting there? Technically balanced, technically responsible. I'll look at the numbers and everything adds up. Rent paid, groceries tracked, gas logged, nothing flashing red. And yet my chest still tightens a little, like I forgot something important. I remember assuming for a long time that if money felt stressful, it meant I messed up somewhere. Like I missed a category or went dumb on a weekend. But sometimes I'd stare at the screen and realize I didn't break any rules. I followed my own plan. That's the part that started bothering me. Because the effort was there, the discipline was there, and the calm everyone promises was nowhere to be found. There were months where the math was clean. I mean clean. I'd bring in, say, $4,200. I'd send out $4,150. Rent was $1,800. Groceries around $500. Gas maybe $180. Everything had a place. And I'd still feel like I was standing on ice that could crack without warning. Nothing was technically wrong, but nothing felt safe either. I told myself that was just adulthood, that this low-level tension was the price of being responsible. I didn't question it much, because the spreadsheet looked mature. Looking back, that might have been the mistake. Not overspending, not being reckless. Just assuming that if the numbers were correct, the feeling didn't matter. I kept treating that unease like background noise instead of information, and I didn't really want to admit how long I did that. After a while, I started noticing that budgeting mostly happens in the rearview mirror. I'd log expenses days after they happened. Sometimes at the end of the week. Sometimes when the app sent a reminder. It felt organized, but it also felt late. The money was already gone. I'd approve it after the fact and call that awareness. There's something strange about realizing a $240 grocery run happened because you were tired and hungry, but only seeing it once. It settled into a category. I told myself it counted as control because I acknowledged it. But there was still this quiet surprise every time I looked at totals. Like I was learning about my own life from a distance. Knowing where the money went didn't explain why it felt heavier than expected. And that gap started to bother me. I used to love flexibility in a budget. That little buffer line. An extra $40 here. A miscellaneous category that could absorb things without drama. It felt mature, like I was being realistic instead of strict, but flexibility has a way of slowly turning into permission. $60 extra a week doesn't sound like anything. That's 2 meals out, maybe a slightly nicer grocery run. But I remember doing the math one night. 60 times 52, just over $3,000, not on anything memorable, not on something I could point to and say, yeah, that was worth it. It wasn't reckless spending, it was reasonable spending, repeated quietly. And that realization sat weirdly in my stomach, because nothing about it felt like a mistake in the moment. I used to think of fixed expenses as solid ground, rent, insurance, utilities, stuff you build everything else around. But they aren't really fixed. They just move slowly enough that you don't notice the motion. My rent went from $1,650 to $1,750, then $1,850 over a couple of years. No single increase felt catastrophic. Each one got absorbed into the budget like a mild inconvenience. But one night I added up the difference across a year and realized that's an extra $2,400 just to stay in the same place. Same walls, same parking spot, same view out the window. I didn't feel angry about it. I felt resigned, like adjusting was the adult thing to do, and that acceptance quietly cost more than I expected. Subscriptions were another thing I didn't really question for a long time. None of them felt wasteful. Music, shows, cloud storage, a couple apps that made life smoother. $14.99 here, $9.99 there. They all felt earned. Little comforts for long days. I finally listed them out once and got to about $180 a month. That's over $2,000 a year on things I barely think about. I didn't cancel anything right away. That wasn't the point. The uncomfortable part was realizing how rarely I revisited those decisions. They slipped into the category of normal. And normal has a way of hiding costs in plain sight. I don't think we talk enough about fatigue as a financial force. Not burnout, just regular, end-of-day tired. The kind where thinking feels like effort. That's when delivery happens. That's when you pay the extra fee because the idea of cooking feels heavier than the charge. $12 here, $15 there, 3 times a week. I remember doing the math once. Nearly $1,900 a year just to avoid deciding. The budget had room for it, technically, but it didn't capture why it kept happening. It wasn't hunger, it was exhaustion. And seeing that written down made it harder to pretend it was just about convenience. Credit cards used to feel like emotional spackle for me. Not emergencies, just smoothing over uneven months. Minimum payments made everything feel under control. A $2,400 balance didn't sound scary when the payment was $65. What I avoided looking at was the interest. 22%, quietly eating away at nothing. Hundreds of dollars a year just to keep the balance where it was. I remember the moment I finally looked at the total interest paid over time. It wasn't shocking. It was worse than that. It was dull, like I'd been leaking money slowly enough to not feel it. And realizing that didn't make me panic. It just made me tired. There were months that looked successful on paper. Green check marks. Categories under control. I'd close the app and still feel unsatisfied. Like I finished something without knowing why I started. I kept expecting relief as a reward for being disciplined. It never showed up. I told myself to give it time. That stability takes a while to feel real. But month after month, nothing changed emotionally. That's when I started wondering if the budget was answering a question I wasn't really asking. This is probably the part I didn't want to look at first. Budgets are great at managing what goes out, but they don't like questioning what comes in. I built entire systems around making a stagnant income stretch instead of asking why it wasn't moving. Raises that didn't keep up. Side income that never materialized. I focused on optimization because it felt actionable. Admitting that the ceiling was low felt heavier. Managing scarcity was something I could do. Naming it was something else. Grocery trips started feeling different over the last couple years. What used to be a $90 run became $130, then $150. Same items, same brands, the budget adjusted, it always does. But the emotional adjustment never really caught up. That extra $60 a week turns into over $3,000 a year, and somehow it still feels invisible because it's spread out. I didn't feel ripped off. I felt quietly compressed, like the same life was taking up more space. Sometimes budgeting felt less like understanding my life and more like complying with it. Follow the rules. Stay within the lines. Don't ask too many questions. I'd hit my targets and still feel disconnected, like I was managing someone else's finances. It started to feel like something I endured instead of something that helped. And that realization didn't come with a solution, just a sense that structure alone wasn't delivering what I thought it would. Sinking funds were supposed to fix surprise expenses, car repairs, gifts, trips. I did everything right. Saved monthly, planned ahead. And when the expense finally arrived, it still hurt. Writing a $900 check for car work didn't feel easier just because I expected it. Preparedness didn't remove the sting, it just removed the shock. I hadn't really considered the difference until I felt it. A lot of my money goes towards staying functional. Coffee that keeps the day moving. Meals that require zero thought. Small comforts that keep things from slipping. $7 here doesn't feel like anything until you realize it's over $1,800 a year. It's not luxury, it's maintenance. And maintenance spending doesn't feel optional when you're already tired. Over time, budgeting became background noise. Log, categorize, move on. The emotional reaction dulled. I stopped feeling anything when money left. That numbness looked like stability, but it wasn't. It was just familiarity. And familiarity has a way of hiding problems by making them feel normal. I used to compare myself to people who seemed fine. Not rich, just fine. Same jobs, same neighborhoods. I assumed similar finances. What I didn't see were differences in rent timing, family support, old loans paid off. I built expectations on incomplete information. That gap quietly distorted my sense of where I should be. Budgeting can delay things. It buys time emotionally. You're doing something, so it feels like progress. I coasted on that feeling longer than I want to admit. The numbers moved, the structure held, the underlying tension stayed, and recognizing that felt like realizing you've been walking in place. What I think was missing was margin, not goals, not optimization, just breathing room. Budgets love efficiency. They don't always protect slack. Everything was accounted for, which meant everything was fragile. One surprise, and the whole thing felt tight again. Control doesn't automatically bring ease. I had control. I knew where every dollar went, and I still felt pressured. I kept waiting for calm to arrive as a result of organization. It never did. That's probably the most confusing part. Sometimes I'm sitting there late at night, receipt in hand, numbers matching perfectly, and I still feel unsettled. Nothing's wrong. And that's what makes it hard to name. The math works. The feeling doesn't. I'll stare at the total, put the receipt down, and just sit there for a second longer than I need to. Not fixing anything, just noticing.